Hello, beautiful souls. My name's Nick. Welcome to my humble abode. We're here to talk about how to win the gender wars. Huge topic of discussion lately, as you might have noticed. Throughout this video, I'm going to talk through the evolution of the feminist movement, defining what I think feminism means today. What is a man? What is a woman? Sounds silly, but it's a conversation worth talking about. Masculinity and femininity, how they're present, what's healthy, what's toxic, and how do we move forward. I'm not a history buff. I have watched a bunch of people who have talked about these subjects. I've done some research myself, but by all means, please let me know if there's anything that you think I missed out on or you'd like to say more of in the comments below. Getting into it, what are the waves of the feminist movement? So, first wave feminism, or as we might know it, is 19th, 20th century. Legal rights were restored towards women, so they could vote, all of these other things. So essentially, under the law, women are seen as equal to men. However, as we know, there's a lot more to it than that. The goal was met, however, the social stigma was still very prevalent, and there was still a lot of issues that needed to be worked through. So second wave feminism comes along, 1960s to 1980s. The workforce and family roles begin to change. Women are allowed to work among the men to some extent. There is a lot of progress that's made during this time. However, the stigma is still very prevalent. Third wave, 1990s, 2000s. So, individuality, redefining gender roles. This was huge, and this is more reminiscent of what we currently feel in our society. So, men could be feminine, women could be masculine. These ideas of what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, or masculine man, masculine woman, no longer are cut and dry. Normalization becomes this huge topic of conversation. What does it mean to be a feminine man? What does it mean to be a masculine woman? How do we still hold this? Is this healthy? These are all very common conversations during this time, even still now. Fourth wave, 2010s to the present. Combating harassment and body shaming. More awareness, legal social consequences increased. So yeah, there's a lot of underlying harassment that would go on in the workplace and public life. So kind of, as you all know, this common conversation of what should be allowed, getting all these people who are these rich men in these high positions to be called out on their inappropriate behavior and being under full consequence of the law. I wouldn't say full, I guess, but they should be. And body shaming. What is a ideal body type? Is it okay to be overweight? What does that look like? Is that sexy? Topics of conversation that I'll dive into a little bit more as this goes on. Fifth wave. Arguable whether or not this is happening. This is 2017 to the present. Huge push for inclusivity, systemic change. However, paradoxically, divisiveness has become very common. Within a few years, we've gone from this place of let's include everyone and everyone deserves to be seen and heard to everyone except men or everyone except a certain group. And it almost feels like in some regard, minorities are kind of, I don't know, there's just this weird kind of dynamic shift that happened in which we're very hyper-focused on who's oppressed and who's the oppressor in our current society, which I think is a bit silly, to be honest. I think it's important to focus on this stuff and to understand in what ways are we oppressed. However, all of us, no matter what situation you're in, no matter how bad things are, we are all oppressed and privileged in our own ways. That's why I have a little issue with the way that we've been using the word oppressed lately. So some key issues that I noticed throughout kind of these waves is shame doesn't lead to growth, just self-hate. So there was originally this move in the feminist side of things where we were saying women shouldn't be shamed for their body. Women shouldn't be shamed for like anything. They should be allowed to be themselves. And I agree with that. I think shame doesn't really get anyone anywhere. I think if we want to grow, we need to be dedicated and we need to love ourselves. If you just shame someone, while someone might temporarily grow, it doesn't create long-lasting change. So there's this thing of like, oh, it looks like shaming works, but long-term it doesn't, and it creates a lot of resentment. And I guess I also wanted to talk about the paradox of how women used to be shamed for a lot of things, and in some regards are still massively shamed for a lot of things. However, it almost feels like the feminist movement have co-opted shaming into now it's appropriate to shame men because they deserve it. It's like the same, it's almost in some regards even worse mentality of just like, they don't deserve to be listened to. They should be silenced. We'll get more into that. There's a lot to that. Women seem to be thriving financially. Again, the same way as the men, how a few years ago everyone was like, men are the best. How are men doing so good? We need to make it equal for women. This isn't fair. This isn't equal. Yes, the 1% of men are 1% of financially wealthy people are men or have been for a very long period of time. However, also men have consistently for over 100 years been the main people who commit suicide, who are in jail, and all of these other horrible things. And we have this common tendency that I've heard a lot of lately, where it's like, if you're in the 1% of men and you're doing amazing, it's because you got all these good resources and it was all external. It's like, it was none of your own ambition or drive or willingness. I mean, sometimes it's backstabbing people, but it's this idea that like the reason that the 1% of men is at the top is all because of the way society is built for men. However, when we talk about suicide rates or anything like that, then it's like, oh, well, that's men's fault because they're not working through their shit, or they're not learning how to be a better man. They're not asking for the support that they need. However, most of the times when we ask for support, we're oftentimes turned down and meet with quite an aggressive downplaying mentality, which I'll talk more on later. And it just doesn't get anyone anywhere. But I can understand why people treat men that way, but it just isn't going to get us anywhere. Partnerships are weaker than ever. I think I can make a whole video on this because there's a lot to it. I think there's a lot of research to be done to understand more what is happening in this facet, but divorce rates are increasing. Not anything crazy, but also less people are getting married, less people are having children. That's becoming a huge issue of the lack of people having children. A lot of different issues for that. Again, that could be covered in a whole video, but it does tie in here. Men's purpose is fading. How women have been saying, "Kill all men, we don't need men." It's like, yeah, men feel that shit too. Because if women are financially taking care of things and men don't understand what it means to be a masculine man, what that looks like, why that's so beautiful and so powerful and so important, then we start to just lose sight of things. And there's this divinity and specialness in humanity that's lost. I guess digging more into it, I felt like I still don't know what my purpose is, right? And a lot of that comes from the fact that I can't just work for a job and make enough to support a family. I can barely make enough to support myself. On top of that, all of these jobs that help you support a family, or any jobs anywhere, most of them aren't really great for the economy. They're not necessarily great for people themselves. And when I say the economy, I don't mean the broader economy. I mean for the everyday people's experience of the economy. As we see now, the economy is doing fantastic, but at the same time, the common people's experience of it is worse than ever. It's like at one side of things, it's like you have so much opportunity for entrepreneurship, and they just say, oh, well, if you can't make it, it's because you're not working hard enough. And at the same time, it's so based on luck and backstabbing and being this bad human being, quite honestly. Like, I started getting into content creation, and you could see I'm still doing content creation. However, there's this very toxic mentality it's so easy to become a pyramid scheme, where it's like, oh, I can help you if you just help me. And then once you help me, then I can show you that it's just this cyclical thing of just lying and hooking people in, and then it's like you're helping them enough, so then it seems like it works. Like there's just, it's hard to find a good job nowadays, and it's hard to give back to society. Yeah, I could get into that for a whole video as well. Yeah, I talked about how suicide rates are rising, and I can very much understand why. I don't think people really know how to hold space for each other anymore. This isn't just women, this isn't just men. We don't really know how to be there for each other. And being someone who's working through something, we don't know how to take anything other than just absolute love and support. It's like, I think we need to have the strength to be able to balance having loving support, but also being challenged. I'll talk a lot more about that later. Yeah, I talked a little bit about this, but how men's struggles seem to be seen as personal failures. It's like, if you're not doing good, it's all your fault. Meanwhile, for women, it's like, if you're not doing good, it's all of society's fault. And I think for men, that creates a strong sense of self-hate. And I think for women, that creates a lack of accountability. Yeah, but we need more accountability for men and women. That's kind of why Andrew Tate, I think, became so popular among men. Men want to be held accountable, but they also want to feel like they have a purpose. And it doesn't matter how toxic that version of it is, we're going to be seeking out a purpose. And I would love to be a placeholder for someone like Andrew Tate of what a healthy version of masculinity is. We need a lot of them. And I think that should be in in-person communities, but we also need online support. So, defining feminism today. I think a lot of people, the whole push against patriarchy was how it felt like if you believe in the patriarchy, then you inherently hate women. That has just been this very intertwined belief of, if I believe in patriarchy and men leadership generally, even if there are some women leaders, but generally men are in leadership positions, or have that approach, that you immediately hate women. How the traditionalists hate women. It's like, you just believe in a different roles that men and women should play. And I think all of us agree that we shouldn't force people into roles. And bringing that back to feminism, I think feminism most recently, at least how I perceive it and how I've heard many others perceive it, is that it feels like feminism and liberalism is now just hating men. Men don't have a voice to speak. And if they do, they're immediately silenced. It's this strong mentality of men, just pick yourself up by your bootstraps. That's all you need to do. I consider myself, I used to consider myself quite a liberal. Now I see myself more as conservative. And a lot of that is because of this man-hating mentality that I've kind of seen. I am a hardcore liberal at heart. I believe that all of the resources of the government should be put back into the people who are suffering the most. There should never really be a wealth gap. I agree that people who work hard and have achieved what they've achieved, and they're giving back to it. If one person changes 100 people's lives, I think you should be able to live whatever life you want. However, that doesn't mean that you then get to step on others. And I think nowadays there's a lot of businesses out there that help 100 people, like social media and all of these other things, where it's like it helps enough where they make money, but at the crux of it, they're really just taking advantage of people. Patriarchy. Male-led society, it's not inherently bad, but if we want to have a successful patriarchy, we need to integrate love in listening. I truly believe in the duality of perspective. If you're humble, you should be prideful. If you're prideful, you should be humble. I'll dig more into that later. If you're a patriarchy, you also need feminism. It's this natural ebb and flow between patriarchy and feminism in regards to how we approach ourselves and how we approach society. And if we're going to have a patriarchy, which I believe that we, in some regards, need, then we need to integrate love and listening, and we can't silence other people's voices. There needs to be this true unconditional love built into this hierarchical perspective. Now, within feminism, it calls for equality. Equality is a beautiful thing. However, if we call for equality of outcome, more issues are created than solved. One thing that I've seen in regards to a few different people tackling what feminism might lead to and what we're noticing as problems arise as time goes on. Feminism or liberalism has a history of preaching for equality, yet that opens the door for people to take advantage. In the same way that a lot of cults are built on love, in which you have people that are just so vulnerable and they just need a place to be held and supported, cults take advantage of that need for love and they manipulate people. In the same way, not that feminism is inherently manipulative. In fact, it's quite beautiful and it calls for a love, an unconditional love, which I believe we all need. However, in doing so, it opens up the opportunity for people like dictatorships or anarchical societies to come to prevalence. There's been this conversation, since I was a kid, about should we switch to socialism, should we switch to communism? And I think a lot of that is because we want love, we want equality, but when you take it to the extreme, someone will take advantage of that. Communism isn't all equal. There's still a leader, and that leader makes all of the decisions. We need to be in a democracy. We have to be in a democracy. If we want love, you can't be in a loving society in which people's voices don't matter. Everyone's voices need to matter. So yeah, I guess I'm just saying be wary of feminism, as it can often lead to something that is the exact paradox and antithesis to what feminism represents. So now, what is a man? What is a woman? This is a funny conversation. This gets me going. So we have the common understanding of, does sex equal gender? I don't believe sex equals gender. However, I don't think gender means as much as we say it should. I think we should have 3 genders. I think it gets confusing when we make it into this infinite expansiveness. First, tackling the 3 genders. I personally find it quite difficult to use words like they, them, or it. It feels very objectifying or dehumanizing. And they, them feels pluralistic in the fact that it almost just feels like you're not multiple people, right? But I have seen this used in many, many cultures, that in different species, that it's hard for me to say that there is not just 2. I think it's hard for me to accept that, and I'm still thinking through it, but for what I've gathered, it feels like there's 3. And I can accept and respect that. Now, when it comes to this infinite gender belief, I know people will be like, oh, I'm Z-Zem, and that's okay. But the second someone says they want to be a dog or they want to be a monkey, that's crazy talk. Or, except when a child says they want to be a dragon, it's like, oh yeah, be your dragon self. I believe in you. It's mental. It's absolutely mental. I like climbing trees. I like climbing rocks. I like going on all 4s. I like playing into these characters, and I like pretending to be a seaweed floating in the ocean. I like to pretend to be a rock, a mountain, a solid piece of land that's just there and doesn't move. That's a natural part of being human. We embody these different creatures to understand ourselves more deeply. Like to understand I flow like the river, I'm solid like a mountain. Like to take these extremes of I'm a river to I'm literally a river, or I'm acting like a dog, so I'm literally a dog. It takes it to another extent. You be you. If you want to be in public acting like a dog, you want to be in public acting like a monkey, you do you. Doesn't mean that we have to accept it. We aren't going to look at you like, what the hell's going on? You know what I mean? When I climb trees, I don't expect people to just be like, oh yeah, that's normal. I expect people to wonder what I'm doing. That's just how the world works. When someone's doing something abnormal, we get curious. That doesn't mean that we have to judge, but we get curious. We want to know what's going on. And that curiosity cannot be so directly associated with judgment. And I notice in myself when I'm climbing a tree, the second someone looks at me, I'm like, oh, are they judging me? It's like we also have so much internal judgment where, I don't know, I heard this TED Talk where someone said, everyone's rooting for me even if they don't know it yet. It's a beautiful statement. If someone's judging me while I'm in that tree, say they're verbally like, what the hell are you doing? It's my responsibility of how I take that. Do I want to take that and be like, no, you're the worst, how could you judge me? Or do I want to take that as, I can see why you're judging me, but this is something that really makes me feel like I'm whole and helps me express myself in a way that I really love. And it feels great on my back because I'm extending. It feels like I'm living how monkeys like us used to live. But that's my own personal belief. I'm not going to enforce that on others, and I understand if people don't necessarily resonate with that. I think in the same way of genders, we can't assume or expect others to validate our existence as this thing that's very clearly not normal. And I think it's awesome to not normalize things, but we can't normalize abnormalities. That's crazy. We can, however, accept that all of us are weird in our own ways. You could say you're not weird, but we're all goddamn weird, brother, sisters. You can't say that you're not weird. We're all weird in our own ways. And we've just accepted that some of that weirdness is normal. Meanwhile, all of the weirdness is normal. The real question is what weirdness is actually making us, what's hurting us, right? It's like if I believe that I'm trans and I don't know. I don't want to get into that because I don't really know enough to speak on it, but it's things that we should be allowed to have genuine curiosities about and question. The second you're like, you're not allowed to bring that up, we're not allowed to have those questions. Think about who you are becoming when you speak in that way. You're silencing others' voices. Do you want to live in a world without free speech? In a world where the government decides what you're allowed to say? I believe it's the UK where this currently is happening, and potentially other countries as well. I think Canada this is happening as well, where there's like basically the word police, where if you say I'm offended by this, then you could get in trouble for that. Do you realize how crazy that gets? It's a cyclical disagreement that doesn't get anywhere. Anyways, let me move on. There's so much to talk about, but I want to stay focused. So, masculinity and femininity. Why differentiate them? I had a conversation with a friend who is non-binary, and in some regard, I've described myself as non-binary. I like to wear dresses sometime. I like to be feminine, whatever. But I still consider myself a masculine man, and I'm also very feminine in some ways. But why even describe myself as masculine or feminine? And this was a topic of conversation I had with him for a few hours, and there wasn't necessarily a conclusion, but this is what I gathered from it. I believe there is something that is lost when we stop focusing on the masculine and feminine. I believe there's a divinity that is lost. And you may notice this in your own relationships. It's really hard to put to words. But when you embody, I am holding the masculine space, or I am leaning into this receptive feminine space, these things matter. The moon is seen as receptive. It's taking in the light of the sun, and it's embodying it and loving it. The sun is pushing out the strength, and it's giving it to the rest of us to allow us to be our expressive, healthy, alive selves. I mean, life wouldn't exist without the sun. And also, life wouldn't exist without the moon. We need both. And a lot of ancestral wisdom connects us back to the earth. As I was mentioning earlier, the mountains, the river. I think it's a very beautiful practice to lean into what is it like to be one with the nature, because every aspect of nature has its own lessons to learn, I guess you could say. So, yeah, I just think it weakens relationships in a lot of ways. we need someone to hold space. We need someone who's receptive. Like, I'll get more into it, and I think it'll give a bigger picture of why does this matter? Why does this affect relationships? How does this show up in our relationships? How does this show up in ourselves? Toxic versus divine masculine. Broadly described, toxic suppresses emotions, is dominant, and disregards women. The divine is built on strength, leadership, and assertiveness, holding with it empathy and respect. If we are going to be in our divinity, we need to embrace the masculine and feminine traits. You could still be an extremely masculine man while still holding some feminine traits. An example of this, I love this example in regards to Andrew Tate. He preaches how he's a protector, how he's a strong masculine, and all of these things. While this may be true, he's not really respectful towards women. And in some instances he is. He's said some beautiful things that I deeply resonate with. However, at the same time, he's also, from what I've seen in his action towards women, is quite disrespectful and demeaning. And why I believe a huge reason of that is because he doesn't value being empathetic, being soft, holding that feminine space of love in listening. If you never listen, you're not going to be a good protector. I promise you that. You won't know what to protect or how to protect it. You need to be good at listening. And from my perspective, femininity is listening is a huge aspect of femininity. So, going a little bit more into toxic masculine. So the toxic masculine is a protector. On the toxic side, they lie. Just to broadly overview, all masculine is direct, focused, and hierarchical. However, the way that this is shown in a toxic side, the direct becomes overpowering. The focused becomes rigid, not willing to take in other perspectives or have an open mind. Hierarchical, they become aggressive and controlling. You might have noticed this. A lot of this is stemming from a belief that men are not worthy, that they are not worthy. This overcompensation of, I don't believe that I am loved for me being me. And I guess one thing that I missed out is that the masculine believes that their worth is equal to their looks, ability, and efforts. Notice how none of it is unconditional love. It's not your existence is based on love. It's based on your looks, ability, and efforts, what you're born with and what you make yourself into. And because of this, many men who strictly believe in the masculine and don't see the feminine side of things, they don't believe they're worthy, or they struggle with understanding their worthiness. Even if you are handsome and you put out all these efforts and you do all these things to make yourself the best person you can be, there's still this lack of, but I'm only worthy because of what I've done, not because of that I exist. And I think in that, there becomes this deep sense of lacking worthiness, no matter how much you make of yourself. And because of that, I think that generally leads to this overpowering mentality, this rigidity, and this aggressive controlling mentality. What the toxic masculine seeks in women is an attractive woman. The common big tits, wide hips, slim waist. Most importantly, subservient. Loves me in my destructive habits and doesn't want growth. You'll notice that's a commonality between the toxic traits, is that you want to be loved no matter who you are or what you do, or like, I don't care if I killed 10 people, you should still love me for who I am. I think there is something to everyone should be loved no matter what, and I think that love allows us to heal. However, at the same time, if you desire to be loved, regardless of how poorly you treat others, and you think your worth is completely equal no matter how you treat others, you're missing something and you're harming yourself and those around you. Now, getting into the godly, healthy, or divine traits of a masculine. Based in logic. Logical thinkers, generally, in masculine. The underlying belief, like I said before, is looks, ability, and efforts equals to your worth. They are protectors. In the divine, they are honest. In their directness, they are clear about their needs. In their focused attention, they make change. Rather than being stuck in rigidity, they see the broader scope of what's to learn, and they make efforts towards that. Hierarchical, organizing worth. Rather than being aggressive and controlling, saying you need to be here, this is where you deserve to be, this is where I deserve to be, this is where that person deserves to be. Focusing on more kind-hearted approach. Everything on the feminine side that's held is we're all unconditionally loved. However, I don't think people should be necessarily rated based on our worthiness, because we all are worthy in our own ways. However, let's say in a more interpersonal situation, certain friendships I value as more worthy for me at that point in my life than others. And that's how we set boundaries. That's how we know what's worth challenging myself in. Another way of organizing worth is through knowing what should I do first in the day. Should I shower first thing in the morning or at night? Should I eat in the morning or later in the evening after I fasted? Knowing when should I enact certain aspects of God, what organization of my future path? Can I just go to be a CEO? No, that's not how life works. You need to start at step 1. And part of hierarchy is understanding where is step 1? How do I get to step 100? What is the healthy masculine seeking? A loving mother figure. Someone that's nurturing. I found this Latin root called credo, in relation to credibility. And it means to believe and trust. I believe that the divine masculine is seeking someone that believes and trusts in them. And they are loved no matter what. However, they believe and trust it because they are authentic with their word. They have shown that they are a credible man and that they are worth relying on because they've shown again and again and again, I am someone that you can trust. And that looks very different for different people and in different relationships. Most importantly, someone to learn from and with. Now we get into the feminine side of things. Broadly explained, the toxic feminine is subservient, manipulative, and chaotic. It's interesting how subservience and manipulation seem like opposites, but actually have a lot of overlap. It's like, I want you to tell me what to do, but also I'm gonna just nudge you in the way that I actually want you to make me. The divine feminine, nurturing, intuitive, compassionate, with strength and independence. Again, the feminine holding this element of masculinity, yet also in its own way, that is what the feminine is. You cannot have a divine feminine if you are not strong and independent. I think one thing that's very interesting for me to think about is the 50s. I don't know, I didn't live it. However, this time in which women were homemakers, they were at the home, taking care of the children, taking care of the home. The strength it takes to be comfortable in yourself, to be alone in those times, and to fill your time with things that are purely in the home, there is a level of independence with that. To be able to take care of children on your own. The strength and independence to do that is so deep, and it's so undervalued in our society. It takes so much strength to be a woman and to take care of children and to be a mother. Why do you think so many women nowadays don't want to have children? Because it's a huge responsibility and it's a lot of work, and it teaches you a lot of challenges about yourself that you might not be ready to face, but you need to face it. And a lot of that breeds independence. So I'd like to challenge that old belief that the divine feminine women of our past were not independent. They were deeply independent, and they were strong as hell. Some of the strongest women we've probably ever had. It's not easy to live that sort of life. It's also not easy balancing work life and family life. But now everyone has to do that, man or woman. Anyways. Diving into the toxic feminine. They are caregivers. The base that is feminine is indirect, unconditional love, and equality. However, in the toxic side, they are lying, similar to the masculine. In their indirectness, the caregivers imply that others understand you, leading to being misunderstood. This is a very common thing I've seen in relationships. Why didn't you know that I felt this way? Why didn't you know that I liked this thing? Why didn't you know that there was this thing that I never told you that you should have known? Not only is it silly, but it leads to loneliness, because you're not expressing your own needs and desires and you're expecting the other to read your mind. It's funny, but it's also very sad. It's not something that the women or feminine need to do only. It is very important for the masculine to express their needs and desires, like stated in the directness. However, in being indirect, I'll explain soon how the feminine can hold that indirectness while also allowing for their needs to be met. Because indirectness doesn't mean that your needs are never met. However, indirectness in the toxic side means that you just expect others to understand you. In every aspect of life, you're going to feel lonely if you don't know how to express your needs and desires. You're not going to feel seen. You're not going to feel heard, because you didn't give the others opportunity to see and hear you. And even if you do give others the opportunity to see and hear you, it doesn't mean they necessarily will. And that's the scariness of it. That's the challenge of it all. But when you are fully seen and heard, and you've learned the strength in expressing your needs and desires, there's an empowerment that comes from that is, I've seen it in so many people and I felt it in myself. It's one of the most beautiful things in our existence, truly. To be able to express your needs and desires and to have others see you in that. It's truly the most beautiful thing. Caregivers, unconditional love. To disregard in the toxic side, to disregard the masculine, that looks, ability, and worth also is a reality. So basically saying, we are all unconditionally loved. No matter what you do in your life, no matter how hard you work, no matter what you were born with, you're all equal in your worth. You are all equally loved. It's a beautiful sentiment. However, it is very toxic, because the reality is the efforts you make matter. If we were in a completely unconditionally loving world, that's kind of the argument of the issue with communism. If we're a completely unconditionally loved world, people don't have a desire to be their best selves. That's the argument on the other side of capitalism. You're working as hard as you can, because when you work to be your best, that is valued. However, I think one reason why unconditional love has become such a tangible argument and conversation recently is because capitalism no longer, you could work as hard as you goddamn can and you might not make a lot of money. You could work as smart as you goddamn can and you still won't make a lot of money. You can, but it's not necessarily as easy as it is to be a backstabber. If you take advantage of others, you backstab others, you don't care about anyone's emotions or where they get in the world. You don't want the best for others. You just want the best for yourself. Those are the people who rise to the top, quite honestly. Social media would not exist as it does today if people who genuinely cared for the betterment of humanity. It just wouldn't. Along with many, many other technologies that we don't really realize how much they're taking away from us. Our society is built on backstabbers. It's not built on lovers or people who are willing to put in the work to give. That is, I think, why we are lacking this unconditional love. And it's why I can see why a lot of people would disregard the masculine, in that it doesn't matter what efforts you put out. You just deserve to be loved. But we're going down a dark path if we keep thinking that. We need to shift what it means to be successful, what it means to be wealthy, because unfortunately, money is no longer equivalent. The more that you give should be the amount of money that you make. However, it's not. So you have to base it on your own self-worth of realizing, look how much I'm giving. That is beautiful, and that's the only thing that matters. You're changing people's lives when you give, when you go out into the world wanting to be a friend. Part of that is the ability, efforts, and how you present yourself. That matters into how people perceive you, into how that makes a difference in people's lives. Moving on. Yeah, I guess just one last thing to that is it nurtures weakness and victimization. You don't take accountability for your actions. You just say everyone deserves love. I don't need to work on myself. I'm perfect just the way I am. You need to work on yourself to be a stronger person. You need to be vulnerable and take accountability for your actions to grow into a better human being. And I hope that we all strive for greatness. Toxic equality. Protection of equality without hierarchy leads to chaos. This deeply intertwines to what I was just saying, where if everyone is equal and there's no hierarchy, then there's no reason to work hard. There's no reason to give back, most importantly. There's no reason to care for others if everyone is equal. I could kill 10 people and take all your money, and I'm still just as equal as the person who saved 1,000 lives. That just isn't right. There needs to be a difference in what you do in the world and how that affects your worth. It's real. The weakness in regards to equality for the toxic feminine is a disregard of caregiver status and its values. Similarly, your efforts don't matter. The amount you give back doesn't matter. Therefore, you being a caregiver for others is pointless. Because if you're loved regardless, then it doesn't matter how much you give back. It doesn't matter how much you challenge yourself. You're loved equally. You are worthy equally. It's a sad world. We need to give back to each other. We need to care for each other. Do you want to be that murderer? I fucking hope not, right? It's like we need to make ourselves into the best people we can be, and part of that is being a parent. It challenges us more than we could ever imagine, but it also teaches us about ourselves and builds a strength and love that can't be built without it. So again, this common thing that I've heard of women not wanting to be mothers because they no longer value the efforts they're putting out. And I think there's this paradox as well, is like you're not toxic, you're not just divine, you're not just masculine, you're not feminine. These are all an intertwining of beliefs and values. So it's quite common nowadays to see this masculine women who are doing very well financially to not want to be mothers or feel like they can't find a partner in which that they want to be in partnership with to have a child. And I think that's because those women need to relearn how to lean into their feminine, which is a huge challenge in and of itself. And I also think that there needs to be men who hold the masculine, and there's not a whole lot of that nowadays. So there's a lot of reasons why I think a lot of women don't want to be caregivers anymore, or a lot of feminine people don't want to be caregivers anymore. But we need to be caregivers. It teaches us so much about ourselves. If I wanted to be a masculine protector, like, it's not just because I want to protect, it's because protecting teaches me what I want to protect, who I want to protect, why it matters to protect what I'm protecting. In the same way of being a caregiver, it teaches you about yourself in ways that you can never know until you give in that way. Toxic, feminine, attention seeking. What are they seeking from a man? An attractive man. The common 6 foot, 6 inches, 6 figures. Tell me what to do. Loves them in their distractive habits and doesn't want growth. I don't care how terrible I am to everyone in the world. I just deserve to be loved in my destructive habits. You know? Okay. healthy, godly, divine feminine based in emotion. I think a lot of people think that emotional thinking is a terrible thing, and I think emotional thinking is a terrible thing. At the same time, you need to feel into your emotions to understand your emotions. If you might be a very emotional person, you might not be, but if you don't understand your emotions, then they will control you. They will take advantage of you. If you don't understand your fear will drive you. If you don't understand your guilt will drive you. You need to understand these emotions. I mean, even something as inherently good as love, if you don't understand why you're loving or who you're loving for, it could actually create a lot of toxic behavior. So understanding your emotions is key. Feminine based in emotion. The underlying belief is that your existence is equally inherent to your worth. Because you exist, you are worthy. Because you exist, you are loved. I also think that we need to expand that beyond humanity. Because plants exist, they are loved. Everything should be held at this divinity and beauty and love. And I think in some way you can ascribe the way that we treat our planet to rigid masculine behavior of not taking in the perspectives of we are all equally worthy, including pigs, including plants, including all of these microorganisms. They can't build societies like we can, but we wouldn't exist without them. So we must love them all the same and give them space to live all the same. Caregivers. As opposed to lying, the divine is honest. Again, the women are indirect, the feminine are indirect. However, in this facet, they avoid conflict and lean into diplomacy, trusting that the masculine will include the feminine needs. This is where this energetic exchange is so important, where if the masculine is not able to hold this space of asking good questions, holding that loving reverence and vulnerability, then the femininity doesn't get to explore itself. It doesn't get to lean into this nurturing, loving self. If you're just like, nope, it's rigid, that's how things are, sorry, that's how the world is. You need to be very open-minded and loving and give that space for the feminine, asking, what do you need? What do you desire? How could I be there for you? And in the same way, the feminine, although indirect, needs to learn how to express those needs and desires. Unconditional love. Everyone has inherent worth, even within a hierarchical governing body. Going back to the patriarchy, we need this femininity in patriarchy, or else we are very lost. We need this patriarchy of leadership and strength and direction, focus. Yet at the same time, we also need to understand that all of us are worthy. All of us deserve the opportunity to show what we're capable of. Think about the amount of people, I think this is one of the most beautiful things, is like, think about the amount of people that just don't have the resources to show their fullest selves. Sometimes we don't know what those resources are until we get them. So let's give that opportunity. Let's give that space. Let's give that worthiness, that love. Divine feminine equality. Everyone deserves love and protection. Everything deserves love and protection. What are they attention seeking from a man? They're seeking a strong father figure, a provider for the femme, allowing freedom of expression, meeting their partner's needs. They want someone who holds this strength and this dedication and this softness as well, of being able to hold that space. Someone to learn from and with. We're all here to grow, right? And if you aren't, then that only lasts so long. Now, how do we move forward? At the beginning, I said, how do we win the gender war? And I think that was definitely a hook. We don't win the gender war. We don't lose the gender war. There's a million wins and losses and failures and successes that have happened throughout history, especially in regard to the masculine, feminine, patriarchal, feminist approaches. We can't focus on the wins and losses. We just have to focus on the growth. Same as within yourself. You will lose hundreds, thousands of times, if not millions of times throughout your life. However, you also win just as many. When we fixate on these wins and losses, it's very easy to do because they feel more tangible. However, at the same time, they limit our potential for realizing how amazing we are. We need to focus on the growth, how far we've come. We've lost so many battles coming to where we're at today. However, we've also won so many. Yet, overarching, we've grown as a society. It's so beautiful to see. It's like people say, oh, we can't go back to the 50s. We're never going back to the 50s. Trust me. We're just not. It's not possible because we've learned so much. We've learned so much through the failures, through the wins. So now we lean into growth and we embody that growth and we accept that growth when we realize how much we've grown, how much we can grow as an individual and as a society. In that, we need to be loving of ourselves and give us grace through our mistakes. Constantly, this is a very important duality I want to mention here, and I notice it a lot throughout my life, and I think this is important within our individual self and as our community. The duality of boundaries and challenges. You need to push your boundaries constantly, yet at the same time, give yourself that loving space to feed into, look how much I've grown, look who I am. The love and the challenge. One thing I've done recently is a cold plunge with some fellow brothers. We had a lot of conversations around masculinity, holding space for each other. It was a very beautiful experience. But in the going into this water, we're walking barefoot on snow into this freezing cold water. We can't feel our bodies. You can't feel what you're stepping on because it's so cold. You are just in utter pain, yet at the same time, bliss. That's what all challenges are like. They're constantly pushing you to this point of, am I gonna be okay? Will I survive? Will I be the same as I was before? We can't ever know. However, we can feed into our own intuition and understand, what do I notice within myself? As I got out of that cold plunge, I started to notice, okay, I'm in a lot of pain. I'm in unbelievable amount of pain. However, I'm also feeling so blissful in my mind because I know that I can accomplish anything. Yet at the same time, I'm like a little bit worried. Will I get my feeling back in my fingers? Will I get my feeling back in my toes? And understanding that delicate balance of, do I need to seek help? Do I need to go to the car and warm up my feet? Do I need to ask my brothers to help me? Or am I still in a place where I can push myself, keep pushing myself? Am I at a good point where I can push that limit and see, how capable am I? How far can I push my limits? Because the further you push them, the stronger you become. It's this delicate balance of boundaries and challenges. In the boundaries, you're loved. In the challenges, you're also loved. However, the challenge, it doesn't matter if you're loved, you're pushing yourself. I'll leave it at that. Moving forward, the most important element is self-growth. And then once we do that work, bringing that into community. Being the best friend we can to the strangers we meet and the communities that we're a part of. Bring your best self into these relationships and these groups. At least try your best. Always strive for greatness. You're balancing humility, empathy, and challenge. Another duality I want to mention is, I mentioned earlier, is pride and being humble. We must be prideful to be loving, to believe in ourselves, to believe that we're capable of more, and to reflect on how incredible we are. However, we need the humbleness to challenge ourselves and remind ourselves we can always be greater. We are never perfect. There's so many flaws that we have, but there's also so much strength that we have. Having that balance of understanding, I am humble, and it's a constant ebb and flow. It's not like you're always holding both in perfect alignment. It's this constant ebb and flow of, I'm prideful in what I've accomplished. Look at what I've created. And I'm humble in the fact that I've made many mistakes and that I have a lot to learn. I think the Bible talks about this in a lot of ways, but let's not get into that. Men and women's groups. We need more brotherhood. We need more sisterhood. We need more groups to hold each other in brothers and through sisterhood. Only then, once we learn through ourselves, through our community with our brothers, community with our sisters, can we then come together as a community as a whole and really grow to the extent that we really can. There's just so much to say to this. So a lot of this is just a brief overview. When getting into these men's group, when getting into these women's group, I want to bring to mind what to be aware of, what might be dangerous, and what to be aware of in the healthy element. What is a good sign that this is a good group? On the dangerous side, superiority complex. If you ever hear a subtle language of, this is better than that, I am better than this, men are better than women are better than men, we hold something more special than women do, we hold something more special than men do. There is something to the fact that men and masculine holds its own strengths and women and feminine holds its own strengths, just as they hold their own weaknesses. However, be very careful and aware of the language that people are using and how that implies what they believe about what it means to be a man or a woman or a human or a being in our world. Another danger is a lack of accountability. This can show up in a lot of ways, but I think one of the simplest ways is not using I statements. They thought that way. You were thinking that way. We were thinking this. Together, we're this. Some of that can be beautiful, but be very aware of the nuance of that. In general, it's safest to use I statements. My experience was, I observed, I noticed, I perceived, I felt, I'm aware of, I'm experiencing, all coming from this is what I'm noticing. I noticed that together we're stronger. It doesn't have to be perfect. Be graceful with yourself, but speaking in I statements is a very powerful thing to learn. And it makes you realize how much power you have and control you have over your own perceptions, your own experience, what you think it means to be a human, what it means to live a joyful life. It's so much within your own control, and using I statements really nurtures that. What to look for in a healthy community. A lot of preaching about individual worth. Each of us has our own stories. Each of us has our own experiences. Each of us creates our own worthiness based on what we've created of ourselves and the fact that we're all human and living. We're all worthy, and we all have our own stories to tell. We all deserve to be heard. And immediately you might think, well, that person doesn't deserve to be heard. Men don't deserve to be heard because they've been through so much. They need to hear us. They need to hear me. I need to be heard. I need to be heard by masculine. However, I also need to hold a space for the masculine and the feminine. Value your own worth, value others' worth, listen to others. Challenge yourself when you notice that you aren't really caring to listen to a certain subgroup or a certain type of people because you've told yourself some story, some limiting belief that they don't deserve to be heard. We all deserve to be heard. And the sooner you realize that, the more you realize how incredible each and every one of us is, no matter how much you might disagree with someone. Love. Lots of talk about love, how we all deserve love. Accountability. Again, this duality of love and accountability. You need to be loved unconditionally, yet also be held accountable to the way that you show up into the world, the way that you view yourself, the way you view others, the way that you put that onto others. We need to be accountable for the way that we show up and how we have the potential for growth. We are very much lacking accountability in this current world. And in another way, we're also lacking unconditional love. We really need to hold both of these. And a good group will hold both of these in proper alignment. I hope you all find this. All of this, I guess self-awareness is something that also kind of intertwines with all of this. But, yeah. I really appreciate your time with me here today. I'm so grateful that you've watched this. It takes so much strength and dedication. I know, because I've watched videos like this, they can be very boring or challenging of your beliefs. And thank you. You are so incredible. And I am not just saying that blindly. We all are so incredible and have so much potential to be so amazing. And I just want to show us that. How beautiful each and every one of us is. And why are we so beautiful? Understand the depth of that beauty. Because it goes deep, brothers and sisters. It goes deep. Thank you so much. This is my first video. I'm so grateful to have created this. I'm so grateful that you have been with me to see this and see me in my vulnerability and putting this out into the world. I hope you all find what you're looking for. I hope you find these men's groups, these women's groups, this community, this love within yourself and outside of yourself. Thank you. Much love. We're all brothers and sisters. We're all family on this place we call Earth. Thank you. Peace.